Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Please welcome Colleen from Laguna, California.
Good morning. My name is Colleen Whelan, and I'm an alcoholic. My home group is Laguna Beach Speakers Meeting on Wednesday night, California. My sobriety date is January 9th, 1970. I am truly grateful to be here. I don't remember enjoying myself as much as my husband and I have in the last couple of days. He's also a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're just having a great time. And I'd like to thank all of you. You're all responsible for it. And I'd especially like to thank the committee for inviting me. Apparently, they had some difficulty with the tapes. That's how they interview the speakers and determine who's going to come to talk. And when Estelle called me, she invited me to be here to participate. And she said, "We got a tape of yours. It was real scratchy." And she said, "It was only on one side." And she said, "Colleen, how does your story end?" I said, "Listen, Estelle, I hope it hasn't." I don't know if it's just that I wasn't present at some of the openings of the other meetings, or if I've missed it as usual, or what, but I sure would like to see the hands of the people who are new to Alcoholics Anonymous within their first 30 days of sobriety. Mary, look at that. All right. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. We have an absolutely wonderful time in AA, and that's not how I ever saw it. And I hope you see it that way. This is a good introduction for you. I saw it through different eyes for many years. I'm the daughter of a recovering alcoholic, and my dad was a loud Irishman who truly enjoyed living. And I thought he was the most terrific drunk I'd ever met. It was a periodic, and they were very glamorous stories. They end up on the other side of the world calling home. And and they bring gifts, lavish gifts when they come off these drunks, you know. And I didn't know there was anything wrong with my father. I thought he was terrific. And my mother cried a lot, but I just figured that's how she was, you know. But my dad had an unbelievable story. He just went right down the tubes. He was a man who had made a lot of money and ended up on Skid Row and found Alcoholics Anonymous in 1948. And the instant he found you in sobriety, he became a parent. I have a sister. And I'll tell you, first of all, I didn't know what you did to my father. That was my introduction to you. What did you do to my father? He changed so dramatically. Excuse me, and he had this zealousness about Alcoholics Anonymous and his sobriety that was just unbearable to me. I was 12 years old, and he was embarrassing to me. And in 1948, they didn't have anything like 12-step houses, and everybody sobered everybody up in homes, ours, and I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand what had happened to my dad. I blamed you people. I didn't want anything to do with you. I thought, well, it was okay. My mom and dad seemed to be kind of happy about it. But it was just a terrible experience for me. Going through adolescence and having all these people sobering up in our house. Well, fortunately, they started 12-step houses. And that turned out to be unfortunate for my sister and I because my dad was instrumental in putting a lot of them together, and then he was so happy about it that we had all of our holiday dinners in men's 12-step house. That's no way to raise little kids, I'll tell you. By now I'd entered adolescence and I was a pain in the neck anyway. My father said I was a discipline problem. I didn't see it that way. I saw myself as being a little mischievous. And he shipped me off to a girls' boarding school. He said he couldn't deal with me at all. And I went, I was delighted to go to the school. I didn't have to be around all those weird people in AA. And Mother Superior was a lot easier to deal with than my Irish father. Being raised Irish Catholic is considerably different from being just raised Roman Catholic. Now, I'd started drinking by then. I don't remember much about it. I just remember that I liked it. Everybody I knew drank. I thought it was great fun. I loved to party and I loved to play. That's still what I do best. And I just loved it. I loved drinking and running around and having a good time, and school was just in the way. And I was about 20 years old when my father realized that I really had entered into an area where he thought I had a problem with alcohol. Now, I didn't think I did, but he did. And he approached me with it. One of the things I've noticed that you all do all the time, and I do it too now, is when you want to talk to somebody, you sit them down, you put them directly across from you, and you look at them. Well, that made me real nervous. I didn't like those kind of confrontations. So my dad said, Colleen, you have a drinking problem, and I want you to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. Meanwhile, he'd been to one Al-Anon meeting, and he got the whole message. He said, or else you have to leave. Now, I believed him. He said, you are an alcoholic. Now, I thought being an alcoholic was all right. That didn't sound so, I didn't even know what it was. It didn't sound so bad to me. But going to Alcoholics Anonymous, no way. That sounded absolutely terrible to me. I didn't know what else to do. Every time I have entered Alcoholics Anonymous, it's been because I didn't know what else to do. So I went to this meeting, and I knew we were in the Los Angeles area. I absolutely knew there were 5,000 people at that meeting. There weren't, but that's how it seemed. And I looked around, and I didn't see anybody my age, and I kind of hugged the back of the wall. And I had to tell my friends, I was so embarrassed that I was writing about going to AA, that I was writing a term paper on alcoholism. Now, they didn't care. They drank just like I did, you know. Well, I stuck around long enough to try to figure out a way out of this whole mess. And I was another thing I was good at, and I'm sure many of you are, you know, buying a little time. I figured what I was going to have to do, since I knew it meant I was going to have to leave. I couldn't stand Alcoholics Anonymous. I just couldn't stand it. First of all, I didn't want to stop drinking. Secondly, I still thought you were strange. And there was a cross-section of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I couldn't meld with it. You know, I was a snob. And that's gone. Wine will do that to you. So I decided to get married. I married this wonderful Italian Catholic drinking partner of mine. We were in school together. We had a checkered career. I have a friend that says colorful when he's describing his marriage, and I guess it was colorful. I thought he was just going to let me drink the way I wanted to, and we were married in the Catholic Church, and I thought that meant he had to stay married to me no matter what I did. And that's the attitude I entered that marriage with. The other attitude I had was that my life and my happiness were his responsibility. I had obviously not done well by turning it over to my father, so I was going to turn it over to this guy. And he was in the Air Force after we got out of college, and we traveled a lot. We were all over the United States, and it just seemed like, honest to God, every time I turned around, I had another child, and I couldn't even believe it. I didn't know how to be a mother, didn't know how to be a wife. I had been in, I think, 4 colleges. You know, I obviously didn't know how to be a student. And I didn't know what to do with all these kids. I couldn't believe it. My oldest daughter was 2.5 when the third daughter was born. And this whole scene is, here is this happy-go-lucky little Irish girl with these 3 babies, and they're drinking their bottles, and they're wetting their pants, and their mother's doing the same damn thing. I tell you, nobody was in charge. It was unbelievable. Nobody was in charge in that family until Kathleen got old enough to take care of all of us. What happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to each of you in this room who have the disease of alcoholism, was my personality was changing. I wasn't happy-go-lucky anymore. I was mean. I was getting mean, and I'd say things at the most inappropriate times, and the target I had in those years was always my husband. And I just became the most embittered human being, and I couldn't understand what was going on with me. I didn't see any relationship between the way I drank and what was happening to me with my personality. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to. I didn't look for it at all. I had a 4th child, my first son, and he died in infancy. And what that did was allow me to get real mad at God and walk away from the Catholic Church. I was awfully uncomfortable when I was going to church. I just felt this tremendous sense of guilt. And I didn't know why. I just felt guilty. And that's when I noticed that I was starting to have this personality change. And all I did to correct it was drink more and take more pills. I started taking pills, too. I don't ever mean not to share that with you. I started that when I was 15, right along with the booze. And I worked real hard at attaining some kind of balance with this whole hand was full of pills and the booze over here. And God, I just never got there. I just never got what I really wanted out of it. But I had to drink. I didn't know I had to drink. And I drank. And he went overseas, and I was alone with these 3 little children. I came back to California, and I decided I was going to divorce him. I was always going to divorce him. I finally did, but this was like weekly. I was calling attorneys and filing for divorce if he just looked wrong at me. I was so angry and so embittered, and I couldn't seem to get me together anymore, and I didn't know what was wrong. I truly did not know what was wrong with me. I had another child after Mike returned, and his name is Michael. Michael's the bright light of my life. Well, not right now. Michael's very busy being crazy today, but he has been the bright light of my life for a long time. I have never been to an Al-Anon meeting, and I never intend to go. I mean that. I like hanging on to my kids. I like all that pain and misery. I just love it. I just agonize over those kids. Anyway, Michael was a very ill baby and had a lot of problems and was hospitalized a lot. And by now I'm drinking all the time. And my husband's starting to talk to me about my drinking. And I thought he was really betraying me by bringing it out in the open and discussing it with me. And then the doctors, where Michael was hospitalized, would say to him, "Get this crazy woman out of here." You know, they didn't really know I was drinking, and my friends were talking to him about my drinking. And then he started talking to me about it. And he said, "Colleen, you got to do something about yourself." I said, "Listen, I know what's wrong. I need to see a psychiatrist." And he wouldn't let me do that. He said, "No, you need to do something about your drinking." So I felt that pressure that we feel when they're on to us. I hadn't talked to my dad in a long time. And I called my dad up as though there had been no time difference between the last conversation and this one. And I said, "Okay, I'll go to AA." And he was at that time, maybe some of you remember my dad. My dad was Maury Scanlon. And fantastic man. He was at that time chairman of the Desert AA Roundup. So I thought, well, if you have to go to AA, you might as well go where there's a party and have a good time. And I went down to the Roundup. My sister came too. My sister said, I said she was bad drunk like I was. And we spent the whole weekend trying to figure out how to sneak in and out of that Riviera bar without any of you seeing us. I knew you were all real worried about what we were doing, right? But the first thing that happened to me when I got down there, I can't remember what year this was. It's not important anyway. But I ran into a gal that I liked real well, and we were in another organization together outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, listen, they think I have a drinking problem." She whips out from her back pocket, I've never gotten over this, the 20 questions. Now, I thought that was like, you know, some of those religions where they carry around all this literature. I thought everybody in AA walked around with a back pocket, 20 questions, pamphlet. And she said, "Well, we can find out. We can find out." And she did that thing to me. She did it. She sat down and she looked at me right across from me, and she never took her eyes off me. And I was reading down these 20 questions. I got to the bottom, and I said, "Oh, my God, I know now that she knows that I know that she knows." And I was very good with flippant remarks in those days, and I just tossed it off and said something and walked away. And I was just horrified at the results of those 20 questions. And I thought, how am I going to get out of this one? I wanted to drink. I didn't want to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't want to be with you people. I didn't like any of you very much. I didn't like me either. That weekend, I was saved by an article in the LA Times, and it was talking about people that were alcohol-dependent people. And it was sure a lot classier than being an alcoholic. I still did not know what an alcoholic was, but I just had this idea in my head. And so I went home with this newspaper article, and I told my husband that probably this was what was wrong with me. I was an alcohol-dependent person. Well, it's just bullshit. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. It means I'm on my way here. But I was trying to buy a little more time. I spent a lot of years doing that. Meanwhile, what was going on inside of me was I'm mad all the time. I'm enraged. I'm throwing these temper tantrums. I am so unpredictable. You couldn't take me anywhere, so they didn't. But I took me a lot of places. And I was so... I don't know what the feeling inside was. I guess now that I look at it, it was desperation. Something inside of me drove me, and it manifested itself in every possible form of activity I could get involved in. I was simultaneously room mother for all those kids. I was a Girl Scout leader and Brownie leader, and I went all the way up in the administration of the Girl Scouts, and I was very busy in a political party, which my husband had told me would ruin him if I joined it, and so I did. And I was very busy in church activities, and what I knew about myself was, and I was also teaching school, I couldn't get along with people. I knew that about me, and I worked very hard at not letting any of you know that about me. So the only way I could handle it was I either had to be in charge or I couldn't be there. And, you know, I was okay in that organizational role as long as I had plenty of drink, and I was still functioning all right, but it's just that I felt so awful all the time. Now I was into this chronic insomnia. I just never slept. Took pills and drank and took pills and drank, and my husband had worked real hard at trying to control my drinking. And every time he did something, I would turn around and undo it. And he took my money away from me. He took my rights one by one by one away from me. He knew what he had. He had a drunk for life. And I wasn't to the point where I could really admit that. But I was getting into more and more trouble with me. I was seriously thinking about killing myself. I got to where I couldn't look at my children. I adored those children. They were the whole reason for my being alive as far as I could see at that time. And I couldn't even look at them, and I couldn't talk to them. I never knew what to say to them. I knew how to tell them what to do. That was it. And I saw myself go through the progression of the disease of alcoholism, absolutely not knowing that that's what was happening to me. Just hitting drinking like that was such a nightmare now that I look back. But more than that, it was the feelings. They were just a nightmare. I hated the way I felt about myself and everybody around me. And it seemed like I had to make one more pass at Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd gotten into some trouble. I was having blackouts that were bad, too, and they were frightening me. When I was no longer allowed to drive the car, it was bad at our house. And I blamed Mike, my ex-husband. It was making me laugh. One night on the Johnny Carson show, they were trying to determine a very genteel way of saying ex-husband, and somebody came up with the word former, and somebody else came up with the word used. And for about 2 years I called him my used husband. But I didn't know what to call him. Anyway, he was furious with me, absolutely furious with me. And he was talking to me all the time about doing something about my drinking. And so one night we had a terrible, terrible argument. I threw a butcher knife at him, and I meant to kill him. You know, it wasn't one of those wonderful things that happens to us in a blackout. I went after him to kill him. And when I was doing my fifth step, my sponsor, who was just a dear, she said, "Oh, honey, that's okay. I know you were in a blackout." I said, "No, I wasn't. I meant to kill that son of a bitch." I was furious with him. I thought my life was his fault. Anyway, we had this terrible argument, and I wanted to see a psychiatrist, and I was on that thing again. And I called my father at 3 in the morning. Again, this is a couple of years later since I'd been to the roundup. And I said, "Daddy, you got to help me." Now, I thought that just once he could be a father, like I wanted him to be. My father was a professional AA member. And my mother became a professional Al-Anon. She had 3 sentences that covered all of life's experiences. So my dad says to me, "Colleen, you're drunk." We all knew that. It was 3 in the morning. And I said, "I got to have some help." And he said, "All right, I'm going to help you." Oh, so relieved. He gave me the telephone number of the Orange County Central Office of Alcoholics Anonymous. I hung up that phone and I thought, God, just once, why couldn't I have a real dad? But, you know, I didn't know what else to do, so I started. I just had to get up a lot of courage, and I drank every day, and I'd call Central Office. Oh, and then I'll tell you what was happening to me. I became one of those wonderful crying drunks. To me, they are the most disgusting thing that could have happened to me. I cried all the time. And I called Central Office, and I'm sobbing, and I'm crying, and they answer the phone, and they say, "Alcoholics Anonymous, may we help you?" I get this lift. I think, oh, thank God somebody's going to help me. And then they say, "Do you want to stop drinking?" And I hang up. Finally, after 8 consecutive days of calling Central Office, I guess somebody answered the phone differently, and I was able to... I was tired, too, and I was able... I started talking to this guy. He was really dear. And he said, "What's your name?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, we have a lot of you Irish girls here." It struck me so funny. I started to laugh. And I said, "Well, I'd like to know where there's a meeting close to my house." And he said, "You don't sound too well." And I've been drinking a lot of wine. And I'm really a winette. Classes it up a little. I was taking a lot of pills, and I didn't think real clearly then. He said, "You sound like you need help." And he described to me what a 12-step call was. And I was just horrified. I didn't want any of you to come after me. You know, it wasn't that bad. It was bad enough I was going to go to this meeting. And I said, no. And so we talked for a while longer, and then he said, "Well, how would you like to have a lady I know come and pick you up?" Oh, that was wonderful, you know. So rummy, I couldn't keep it together from 5 minutes ago. So this lady's making a 12-step call on me, and she comes in my house, sits down on my couch in my living room, and does that thing. She looks me right in the eye. Now, the people around me were very nervous. They walked around like this, just tiptoe. We don't want to upset Mom, because Mom just went into these things where she threw dishes and screamed and yelled and sobbed on the couch and passed out, and one of the little kids had to pick me up and put me to bed. And we don't want to upset Mom. And this lady's sitting in my living room, and she says to me, "Have you ever tried to kill yourself?" And I was absolutely shocked. Nobody ever talks to me like that. And then the second thing that was happening to me is I was trying to figure out how she knew that. And we went to this meeting down at Ebell in Newport Beach, and she sat me right in the front, and it came time for people to introduce themselves as newcomers. And I started to cry. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And I said, "I can't do that." She patted me on the back. She says, "Honey, you don't have to." So I didn't. And I stayed sober for 4 months like that. And, the obsession to drink was not removed from me, and I think being in the middle of sober, happy, joyous, and free alcoholics when you want to drink so bad you can kill every one of them was the most awful thing that happened to me. That was the true nightmare in my life, and my alcoholism was sitting in those meetings wanting to drink. And the reason I didn't drink is that I could not get rid of this woman. I couldn't get rid of her. She was in some kind of crisis in her own sobriety. She called me every single day, and we went to 2 and 3 meetings a day, and then we'd get home, and she'd call me and ask me what I was cooking for dinner. I think, what is wrong with her? And I would say, if I can get away from her, I'm going to drink. Well, the first time I got away from her, I did. But meanwhile, all this, I'm not drinking, and this venom is pouring out of me, just pouring out of me. And I'm just full of anger and hatred. And I can't stand any of you. And I don't know what you have, but you look awful good to me. And there was this one meeting that we used to go to. It was a little 12 and 12 study group right in our neighborhood. And I loved the women in that group. Now, they were just kind to me. And and they always asked about my children. And they always seemed like they were doing well in life. And they looked good. And they weren't laying on the table sobbing like I had been doing, And I used to sit there and try to figure out how they got where they were. And I couldn't get it. I didn't hear anything in the meetings. And I believed each and every one of you when you told me that you started at that point I was starting at. I knew that was true, but I couldn't figure out what the secret was. And I would just sit there and puzzle that and think it over day in and day out for 4 months at these meetings. How did they do this? How did they get there? And I didn't know. I didn't know. But I was a wreck, and I drank. I drank, and I remember when I drank and how I drank. And I drank with, first of all, the intention of proving to my father that I was an alcoholic and that it didn't work here anyway. And then my second, as I went along with this, and then I thought, well, I might as well just die. I heard all these stories about people that died drinking. And I thought it was instantaneous. If I just started drinking, I would die. The other thing I heard in AA in those 4 months was everybody was talking about reaching a bottom. And I'd look around and I'd think, yeah, this is it. This is it. And I didn't want to be there. You were still too different from me. Or I was too different. I don't know. Anyway, that I drank for 6 months more, and it was really a nightmare. I thought that I was drinking a Red Mountain wine. God, I wasn't allowed to have any money, and that stuff cost $1.09 a gallon. And I was so horrified to think that I had to drink this and that it was his fault because he wouldn't buy me any decent booze. So I kept it under the sink, and what I used to do was transfer it every day to this crystal decanter and then put it in a coffee mug. I didn't want anybody know I was drinking. I tell you, if you drink enough of that stuff, you could smell me a block away. It just oozed out of my pores. And my first thoughts in those first days I was drinking was, I'm going to show those people that it doesn't work. I'm going to die, and I'm going to be laid out in this casket, and I am going to have my arms entwined around a bottle of Cuddy Sark. And they're all going to come by, and they're going to feel badly for me. And then I didn't care anymore. I was just too busy trying to kill myself with booze and pills, and I worked real hard at it, and it didn't work, you know. I woke up and I'd think, today's the day I'm going to do it, you know. And I'd try. I tried a couple of times, very sincere attempts. And then I'd wake up, I think, well, didn't work, so I'd go play golf. That's how crazy I was, just nutty in a fruitcake. And couldn't talk to my children at all. Now, this was the last couple of months of my drinking. And I thought they had quit talking to me. And my oldest daughter says, Mom, you walked around that house like a zombie. We didn't know what was wrong with you, and you would not talk to us. That's how distorted everything had become.
Please turn to side 2 of this cassette to continue the program.
You walked around that house like a zombie. We didn't know what was wrong with you, and you would not talk to us. That's how distorted everything had become. And I cried. I'd get the books out. I'd bought all the books. And I'd get them out, and I'd put this crystal decanter out, and I'd read all these books and sob and beg God to help me. And I'm drinking, you know, out of the coffee mug. And the sad thing was I'm drinking round the clock, and I don't know the difference between day and night. And I had a 12-hour blackout that absolutely put me under. It terrified me so much. I'd had some bad ones where I came out of them, and I was with the children, and I was behind the wheel of the car. I wasn't allowed to drive. And I'd just shake all over. I'd shake and shake and shake, and I'd think, my God, you're going to kill these kids. So the obvious solution to that was to quit driving. And I did. For good. And the next one I had was a 12-hour one, and it was right at the end of my drinking. And I remember coming out of that thing, and I remember the children were all sitting at the table. And I said to them, it's time for you to get, it was 7:30, and I said, it's time for you to get ready to go to school. They were 12, 11, 10, and 6 then. And they said, Mom, we just had dinner. We're getting ready for bed. I was just horrified. That really shook me up, and I started thinking about what was I going to do about myself. And I'd had a couple of bad experiences, in as much as some friends of mine had terrible things happen to them. And when I got the news, I went to pieces. And I was very aware of the fact that there was nothing inside of me. Nothing. I just used to go to pieces and cry. I had no more resources to draw on. Meanwhile, I had been back to church. I cried. And in fact, I was teaching at the little Catholic school that the children were going to. Those people were good to me. They were really good to me. I would like to get through one talk without crying, but I can't. The fact that I don't drink and the fact that I am here is so awesome to me that when I think of those last days, I am grateful. They are not tears of sadness, and I am awed by the whole thing because it simply had nothing to do with it. It was Christmas time, and my dad came to see the children and to see us, and I planned one great Christmas to pull it all together, one more time. My husband was talking about divorce, and then I would talk about divorce, and we don't divorce in our religion, and I didn't know anybody that was divorced. That is incredible to me. I had never even met a human being that had been divorced till I came here. Once I got your approval, you wouldn't really like to hear my marital record. But, and for him to be talking about leaving me was terrifying to me. And I would not put down the booze. I wouldn't do it. I think I couldn't do it. And my dad came on Christmas Day, and I'd stolen credit cards, and I had spent $8,000 to make this a glorious Christmas. I bought these, and this was in 1969. I bought these kids stuff they didn't need or want. I stopped that bar, and we had party after party after party. I was so sick of that Red Mountain. And I just ran around like a crazy person that whole Christmas season, and I really tried to have a nice Christmas Day. And I was totally incapable of keeping anything I put together. And my dad looked at me and he said, Colleen, I'm not going to watch you kill yourself. And I knew he meant it when he and my mom left. He said, we're not coming back here. You sent the children to see us. And I was just furious with him. I felt betrayed one more time. All alcoholics that I know what it feels like to be released. I love the word. I hate the feeling. I always felt kicked out. And we went to New Year's Day. New Year's Eve was a nightmare at our house. I drank all night and got my hands on a bottle of Cuddy Sark and drank the whole thing, and I never went to bed, and I had one more wonderful suicide attempt, and I went to church New Year's Day, and I didn't like the way I was living very much. I was doing things that I couldn't believe I was capable of doing. Sure, I was drunk, but I couldn't believe I did it. I ran around like some kind of a crazy person, and just had one affair after another, and was so tacky because that wasn't what I was like. I'm not that kind of person. And I realized that I wasn't me anymore. And I didn't know what happened to that 21-year-old who was happy-go-lucky. I couldn't find her, and who loved life and loved parties and loved to be with people. I wasn't there. I was gone. And I went to church on New Year's Day, and I asked God to help me for the first time. I just said, please help me. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't understand what you were telling me when you talked to me about alcoholism. I didn't hear it. The help I received that day was I had enough strength, and we lived in this huge, well, we had a lot of kids for one thing. We lived in this huge two-story home. And I was able to go home, and I threw all the pills in the house out, just like some kind of a maniac. I went from room to room and floor to floor and found them all and got rid of them. And I didn't want to drink, and I didn't understand that for me. I had not been without a drink since I'd been sober 6 months before. And I just didn't want to drink, and I felt very peaceful for a couple of days. And I am just such an angry person, or was. And something really awful happened, in as much as my husband had thought maybe if I stopped all the stuff I was involved in and came to work for him, it might help me. And he was really trying hard to help. And his partner said, we can't have her here. And he told me that, and I got really angry. And I was on this reform kick. For me, that meant I was cooking, you know. Oh, God, it was so bad in that house. We had subcontracted every possible service out. You know, the mothers are drunk. And I wasn't able to do anything except get up and play golf and play bridge. I was still able to play. And so I'm cooking dinner. This is about the 4th or 5th or 6th of January. I don't remember, but when I got this news, and I was just furious with him. And I said to the kids, I'll be right back. We belong to a country club close to the house. And I said, I'm going to go have one drink. And I meant that. And that's when I saw what kind of illness I truly have. Because I went over there and had one drink. And if you are alcoholic like I am, and you have that phenomena of craving like I do, you can't drink one drink. And I didn't come home until the next day. And I was a little flippant the next day, too. You know, the mouth of mine never stopped. And he wasn't going for any more of it, and neither were the kids. And he said, Colleen, I'm all through. And I knew he meant it. And my daughter, my little daughter, my 11-year-old, who I just adored my children, she says, Mom, I don't want you to come to school today. I was very busy getting ready to go where I needed to be. She said, you embarrassed me. And my God, it went through me like a knife. Now, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous tells us that we are blessed, each of us, and we will have a moment of clarity. Mine was so simple, I almost missed it. I got up after my daughters left for school, and I went to the kitchen. I was so dramatic anyway, and I thought, well, I'm going to kill myself again. And I went for the butcher knife again, I went for the butcher knife, and I got it right about here. And I thought, well, I don't really want to do this. I just want to get a little help. And the lady was coming for the ironing. And I looked at my hand, and I thought, well, God, my golf glove won't fit if I do that. I mean, you know, I was just wacky. And I pulled down a bottle of scotch, and I set it down on the counter, and I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I looked at it. This was left over from the Christmas contraband. And I said, oh, no, not this time. That is your problem. And I turned away from that bottle, and I went to the phone. And I think that's what we all do. And I started calling the ladies in Alcoholics Anonymous that lived in my neighborhood. And I couldn't get anybody on the phone, and I was starting to feel that panic and that hysteria coming. And finally I got a lady on the phone, and I said, Mary, will you help me? And she said, yeah, I'll be right over. And she didn't ask me if I finally stopped drinking. And when she got to my house, she said, what can I do for you, Colleen? And I said, oh, just don't leave me alone. And at that moment, I fully understood what we have here. As I held her hand, I knew that I couldn't stay sober without you. But with you, I could. And that is all Alcoholics Anonymous is all about. We are so big, and I have been so many places, and I've seen so many sober alcoholics. But it's still, just as it was in the beginning, for me and for you in your beginning, in the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous with Bob and Bill, it's one drunk talking to another from the heart. And that's the celebration of sobriety for me. You know, that I can do that today, that I don't drink. I don't understand why I don't drink. It's just beyond me. I don't know how I have managed, I haven't, to stay here with you. You know, I am crazy. And I don't know how people like me make it. But I'm here. And the ladies took me to a recovery house. And the same one that we used to go to when I told you I was a snob. And I looked down my nose at all those women. I thought, God, they had to be institutionalized. They are really low-bottom drunks, you know. And I asked those ladies if they would let me stay in that recovery house, and they said yes, they would, and I was grateful. I thought I was so crazy that if they knew, they were going to take me away and lock me up, and they'd keep me there forever. Nobody ever threatened me with that I remember, but that was my biggest fear going, was that somebody was going to put me in a psych hospital somewhere, and it was going to be all over for good. I stayed in that recovery house for the usual length of time in those days. It was the only one in Orange County. It was on Skid Row. And I was grateful. And I was given the gift of hope in that recovery house. I saw women functioning. They were doing things I couldn't do, period. We went to meetings. There was no program there. I work in this business today, and we're so into programs, you know. God, keeping everybody busy all day long until it's time to go to meeting is how I see it. But our program at that recovery house, there was the villa, was that we went to AA meetings, and people dropped in to talk to us, and people cared about us, and I was getting well. and I was feeling wonderful. And I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what happened to that hatred. It was gone. I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. I loved everything about it that I had hated for all those years. I loved the people. I never saw such zany, crazy people in my life, and I just fit right in. And I just, it was wonderful. Now, I went home to a house with 4 children and a husband when I was 30 days sober. Absolutely out of my mind, without pills and without alcohol. I had no idea what to do with myself. None. I looked at those kids and I thought, what am I going to say to them? I didn't even know how to talk to my own children. I could not talk to them. And all I could do was go to meetings. The first 18 months of my sobriety, I honestly went to 2 and 3 meetings a day. I didn't know what to do about my children. I couldn't keep leaving them all the time, so I just took them with me. Took them to step houses, took them to dinners, took them to holiday dinners. They were raised much like I was. I decided if I got a divorce, I'd be fine. Well, see, in AA, it was accepted. In the society I came from, it wasn't. And I thought, these people, they're wonderful. They'll like me anyways, even if I get a divorce. And I wanted to get a divorce. I felt that my sobriety was threatened by that marriage. Nah, that was the excuse I used at the time, and it was absolutely not true. But it's not important. That's what I did. I filed for divorce. I was totally incapable of taking care of myself, let alone 4 children, and all the responsibilities we had with businesses. And it was just a really dumb thing to do. It's what it was. But I operated on that self-will run riot that some of you may know about for the first 3 years of my sobriety. I didn't want a sponsor. I didn't want any of you telling me what to do. I was sober. I was just thrilled to be sober. But I lived with this fear that I was going to drink. And the only way I could quiet that fear was to be sitting in a meeting. As soon as I'd walk out of the meeting, the fear came back. I remember I read the big book. And I thought, no, not me. No way. And I closed it, and I put it away, and I started sleeping with it because it made me feel better. I just held that book. And then I decided after a little while that these children and I weren't doing too well. And what we probably needed was a sober daddy. That'd fix the whole thing up. So I got married. I have never worked a step. I'm saying I'm alcoholic. I'm running around in meetings, and I'm having a wonderful time. I think I've moved these children and I something like 6 times. I told my husband I didn't want my house that he gave me. He gave me a car. I said, I don't want it. And it was just, I was not well. Ask me about that today, I'll tell you. I'd keep it all. I had a divorce attorney who was a member of this fellowship, and he had just started law practice, and I was his first case. And I think he got some of the principles mixed up with community property. He said to me, listen, you got to pay that $8,000 debt. We don't split debts like that down the middle. That was your drinking debt, and you're going to feel wonderful when you pay that all back. I paid it, and I never felt wonderful. And here I am running around, and I married this guy, and I'm not going to say anything about him, but he married me, all right, and I was wacko. We didn't stay married very long, 10 months. And all I did was move in and out, and I wasn't taking good care of my children. I didn't know how. I had a couple of different sponsors, and it wasn't, I wouldn't do anything that they asked me to do, and I divorced this man. And I was driving through a parking lot one day, and I don't know how these things happen to each of you, but they happen always at very inopportune times. And all of a sudden, I was overwhelmed. I was devastated. I thought, my God, you are 3 years sober. You are no different from the day you walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. You haven't done anything to change. You're just not drinking. And I just cried, and I cried, and I cried. And I went home, and I called a man that was a friend of my dad's, and I wasn't particularly fond of him. What I liked about him was he'd been sober a long time, and I liked the way he was with people. And I asked him if he would help me. And he said, oh, yeah, but there were a lot of conditions. And I was desperate, and I didn't listen to the conditions. I just was so grateful somebody said they'd help me. And there was so much disharmony in my house, I couldn't... I yelled at those kids all the time, and then I'd sit down and cry. And I think, what's the matter with you? You're sober. You don't act like this. We're sober. And I couldn't get along with people again, sober, well enough to work any place with any consistency. And here I had 2 divorces. I don't even believe in divorce in the first place. So I was very willing to do what I was asked to do. We started working a program of recovery. I was stubborn and mean and nasty, but I did what I was told. And my life started to turn around. And by the time I was 5 years sober, there was harmony in our household. And the kids and I could get along just terrific. And that's what I wanted to do more than anything in the world, was repair the damage with each of those children that I felt I had done. And our communication opened up, and we were the product of a lot of therapies. My sponsors sent us to family counseling, and to Alateen, and to Al-Anon. I didn't go, they weren't telling me. And it worked. It worked beautifully. And things were going very well in our lives. And I had made the amends I thought I needed to make. He made my list for me. You believe that one. He used to call me periodically and say, okay, it's this time to do this and go talk to this person. And I'd call him with my problems, and I'd be crying about something with one of these kids, and he'd give me the address of a newcomer to pick up and take to an AA meeting. And I'd think, what in the hell's wrong with him? You know, crazy, man. It all worked, and I stayed sober, and I started feeling like I belonged here, and I started being peaceful and happy, and I understood what the promises of AA meant. Some of them were being realized in my life. And what happened was my father was taken ill, and my parents lived south of us in Palm Desert, and we lived at the beach. And I asked my ex-husband, if he would please take the kids for a while, because my sponsor said, I'd like you to go down to where your mom and dad live, and I'd like you to repair that relationship. It's time. And I'm so grateful that by now I had the sense of taking direction, just knowing that it was the right thing for me in my sobriety to always listen to him. And I went there, and I ended up staying there almost a year. I got a job right away teaching school, and moved in with my mother, and my dad never came out of the hospital. He died, and we thought he was going to have a very simple surgery. The wonderful thing that happened, my father was such a kick. There was a long, drawn-out, agonizing battle, and my dad was 29 years sober then. We had a lot of time to talk, he and I, and my sister was celebrating her first year of sobriety that year, and she was there with us, and it seemed like it was exactly what it was supposed to be. My dad went into a coma and stayed in that coma for months. And when I was at the hospital, the day before he came out of the coma, my father, the professional AA member, and he reaches out and he says to the nurse, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Colleen. She's a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, and so is my other daughter, Marlene. And he said, you know what? To this nurse, they're going to be okay. And that's true. And that's, I think, what my father left were 2 kids who are sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I wish he were alive today. My daughter is now 2 months sober. And I'd like for him to have seen that. But he loved Alcoholics Anonymous with this zest. It never changed for him. And for him to see his kids sober was all he needed. And he knew that all we needed was to be here with you. And I think that is one unbelievable legacy to leave. We were sort of topsy-turvy after my dad died, and I wasn't sure what to do. I came back to Newport Beach and tried to get a job in the school district I had left, and it wasn't working out. And a friend of mine ran recovery houses and asked me if I'd like to go to work for him. And I said, sure, I'd love to. I didn't have anything to do. And I did. I went to work there, and it was absolutely wonderful. And as much as the timing was so terrific, 6 months later I came down with cancer. And I came out of that operating room, and I was right back where I started from when I came to you in this feeling state I was in. I was absolutely terrified. They're talking to me about chemotherapy and years and years and years of what this means ahead of me if I live. And I thought, I can't do this. I cannot do this. And I said, God, you better help me because I can't do this. And every time I ask God for help, He sends one of you. So I'd been dating this fellow that was kind of fun. And it was a real lightweight relationship. And Tom came to the hospital and he said, Colleen, you better come home with me and I'm going to take care of you until you get well. And I think that was about 7 years or 6 years ago, and I haven't left, and he didn't define well. The thing I love about Tom is he has a great program, but he has such a good sense of humor, and I needed that more than anything, and I needed this job at this recovery house because I felt hopeless, absolutely hopeless, and I was going to kill myself. I vacillated from that position day in and day out. I was not going to be a cancer victim. That's how I saw it, and I've had cancer for 6 years. It just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. But what helped me about that job was when I was holding those women's hands and seeing their lives that had been torn apart by the disease of alcoholism. And I'd say to them, there's hope for you if you don't drink. I started to feel hope. It seemed to work in reverse. And it's been a bitch. You know, there's no other way to describe it. Having cancer is not fun. But what has been okay about it all is that I have you, that I have been able to get through this without drinking, and get in and out of all of those toxic medications and not end up addicted to anything is just a miracle in my life. You know. And I love my work. I'm able to work as a member of a treatment team today in a psych hospital, and I got the key to the door, and it's a locked ward. But you'll feel funny when it slams behind me. And I love my marriage, and I love my husband and my children, and I have wonderful relationships. As I said in the beginning, Michael got crazy. Michael just graduated from high school and got completely crazy and did a whole number with hallucinogenics, did it here in Hawaii, too, and alcohol, and finally admitted himself to a psych program. And meanwhile, I'm calling Tom, and I'm calling Lynn, and I'm crying, and I'm hysterical, and I end up in the cardiac care unit. That's how well I know about releasing. And in there for 5 days, and I'm talking to Duffy, and I'm just going nuts, and everybody in Northern California is trying to get this kid sober. Meanwhile, Kathleen, who's 24, sort of slips around the back door, has one conversation with Lynn and Pam, and admits herself to a recovery house. And I thought, God, that's amazing. And she is just doing beautifully. And she is one of those happy, joyous, enthusiastic Alcoholics Anonymous members. And I'm so grateful for her sobriety, and for mine, and for all of ours. And those of you that are new, you stood up today. What I didn't know when I came here that time, there is a secret. And I didn't stand up, and I didn't say my name, and I didn't say I was alcoholic. And that's the secret, because that's the beginning. And when you do that, you're home free with us. Thank you.